panel on unlocking US growth with direct monetization. So we've got a couple of people for you today. I'll be moderating. My name is Ben Williams. I'm the president of Level Up Collective, which is, we created Community Clubhouse. So thank you guys for joining us. On the panel, I'll have Maxim. He can introduce himself and give you, introduce himself and give you a little bit of his background. And we have Chip from FastSpring. I'll give you an opportunity first.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Maxim. I have like 18 years of experience in game development and like edtech. Past 7 years, I was leading business development and M&A function in Playrix, which is number 3, I assume, like in the world, mobile game developer still in terms of grossing. And yeah, now, like last year, I left Playrix and started to consult and advise different game development companies, as well as edtech companies and fintech companies in gaming. And this topic is like really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks, Maxim, for joining us on this panel. Looking forward to talking with you, and Ben for having us at Community Clubhouse. It's a great event. So I'm Chip. I'm the head of gaming at FastSpring. We're a direct-to-consumer payment platform to enable publishers to sell globally through their web stores. We have over 3,000 customers globally, and we have offices all over the world. Work with some of the biggest names in gaming. And so my role as head of gaming here is to really leverage the experience I have from the industry to help our customers in the industry overall to market and monetize direct-to-consumer. Most recently, I worked at Scopely for a few years across product and marketing roles and leading a lot of direct-to-consumer strategy. And so trying to take those learnings and bring those forward to help drive the conversation forward here. So looking forward to talking with y'all today.
Well, thank you guys again, both for joining. So let's just jump right in. So the recent Epic versus Apple ruling raised the ceiling for D2C volume. So how has it shifted strategies for growth in the US market? We lost it again. Well, we won't worry about that. So I'm actually going to pass this one first to you again, Max. So again, the question is, how has it shifted strategies for growth in the US market?
Yeah, sure. I think that, like, first of all, this like win in this battle for Epic was epic, and for the whole industry, it was it was epic. And thanks for Epic for doing so for the whole industry. Second one, of course. Like a lot of companies, they were trying at some point or like looking for opportunities to accept payments and work with customers in terms of payments in like various ways. But these, especially in the United States, and opportunity to integrate like third parties in a direct way without any restrictions and limitations unlocks like a lot of growth opportunities, because you can technically, what you can do is that you can save this commission and add extra margin, which you can use in terms of like user acquisition to compete with other companies in terms of acquiring customers. So yeah, what do you think, Chip?
Yeah. Actually, there is one thing I want to put on the screen because I think it aligns really well with what you were saying there, Maxim, because we recently ran a survey with FastSpring, and we surveyed over 100 of the senior decision makers in gaming across North America and Europe, and we asked them a series of questions, if they come up on the screen, a series of questions about direct-to-consumer, right? And we asked them dozens of questions, and we'll be publishing this in a full report from FastSpring, so you could be on the lookout for that. But we started basically by asking them, do you currently make use of a web store, right? And we found over half the respondents said, yes, we do currently make use of a web store, but interestingly, 43% said they don't. Right? And these are senior gaming publishers across North America and Europe, so a pretty significant audience here. I don't think this is indicative of the entire industry, but I think it's a really interesting data point, because then of that 43%, we asked them, okay, if you don't have it today, are you planning to make use of a web store in the future? And that's where 96% said yes, they are. So basically, from this survey, we learned that everybody either has a direct-to-consumer platform or will be investing in a direct-to-consumer platform. And then, to Maxim's point, we said, okay, like what's driving that? What's really incentivizing these publishers to want to pursue D2C? And so, again, for this 43% that don't currently have one, we asked them, okay, if you don't have one today, have these recent court rulings, like Epic versus Apple, influenced you? Have these made you more likely to adopt a web store? And again, we saw 96% say yes. And so it's pretty clear that there's a lot shifting in this direction, and companies are investing in it, and it's a big growth opportunity, and the rulings are a lot of what's driving that behavior.
Awesome. Thanks, Chip. So actually, this one's going to be for you as well, Chip. I'll give you a second to sit back down here. So how are games actually capitalizing on the ruling?
So the most basic way is by steering, right? And steering in this context meaning getting players from your game into your off-platform payment. So it could be a web store, or it could be somewhere else. But that's telling players about it, marketing it to players, and saying, hey, we have this store, and you can get more value in this other store. And so you should go purchase there. That's steering players over to the store. Now, before the Epic versus Apple ruling, that was against their policies, right? And if you did that, you could incur the wrath of Apple or anything. And so with this recent ruling in the United States and iOS, now we can steer more freely. But I think what's more interesting beyond that is we've seen gradients to steering emerge in response to this ruling. So it's not a binary, either you're steering or you're not steering, right? I think it's kind of talked about that way a lot of the time, but we've seen companies might just do kind of light steering, saying, hey, we have a web store, just talking about the existence of it, and that can be enough to shift some players over. And then there might be a more aggressive, hey, we have a store, and you can get 20% more if you make a purchase there. Or it could be, we have a side-by-side pricing in our store, where if you purchase on mobile, you get 100 gems, but if you purchase on the web store, you get 120 gems. And so you're being very explicit in the value players get. So it's gradients in the messaging like that, but it's also gradients in the landing page of where you're steering your players. Most traditionally, you've been steering them into a web store or a full store page with all of your items listed and where players can navigate and make the purchase they want to make. But what we're seeing become more common is actually just landing on a checkout page. So not even going to a store, but you just go, you tap the button in the mobile game, it takes you directly to a checkout page, still hosted on a browser, still hosted on a website, so it's off-platform and something powered by FastSpring or another payment processor. But in doing that, you're making it a more frictionless experience for the player, where it's got their account logged in, it's got the item they selected, they can just click checkout and get right back into the game. And so you're really streamlining things for the player. And again, on the United States and iOS, we're seeing that be within these current policies. And I think that's the direction we could see this continue to go, where I think we might even see some games starting to experiment with in-app processing through an off-platform partner, where you don't even have to maybe leave the app and go into a website to make the purchase. Maybe you can just pop that up within the app itself and make the purchase there. Now, this is where it kind of, the rules get a little fuzzy. There's not a clear black and white, this is what is within the guidelines, this is against the guidelines, all of that. It's kind of open to interpretation. But that's why it's important to see what games are doing, so you can understand what are games doing that's getting approved, what are games doing that is being evidenced as compliant with the current policies, and then you can learn from that, replicate it, and do it yourself, and then start to grow your direct-to-consumer revenue that way.
Awesome. So to be quite honest, it seems that you might have touched a bit on what I was going to ask here, but I'll throw this to both of you guys. So as a kind of a follow-up to that, what are some of the strategies outside of what you just discussed that companies are starting to employ to maximize the D2C volume?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I don't want to be like conservative, but still, even like large companies, they're still like some of them, they're still afraid to experimenting, and this is like the main problem to like move forward and drive the whole industry forward. But I know that like a lot of game development companies, they started to be, and the Epic versus Apple case was a driver, of course, as we discussed earlier. And the thing is that they started, like companies started to test like different approaches. Like first approach is that they are not afraid anymore, and this is quite obvious, to use like web shop and the direct links to web shop from the game. And they started to play with like marketing, how to drive customers more to web shop and announcing them there. different like discounts and additional like benefits from webshop. Secondly, of course, I know a few companies who already started to test leading direct in-app purchase to checkout page at the moment. And I think that this is, of course, the most beneficial way because less clicks, less steps for customer. Yeah, like decreasing like frequency and increasing your conversion rates because at any additional step you can like see a decrease in conversions. And from like my point of view, this is the most beneficial thing from like Apple case. I think that even like large companies, they will move slowly, testing. So I assume that like beginning of next year, we will see more and more things and information which will be coming in case Apple will not do anything and will not create any any additional walls.
Thank you.
I have a point to add there too, as far as strategies that we're seeing companies use. And I think what's been clear is that geographic segmentation is critical. Like this is evolving on a country by country basis, and even within the platform within each country can be different. Like what you can do on iOS in the United States today is different than what you can do on Android in the United States today when it comes to direct to consumer. And so the strategy is built around really thinking on that geographic level, like how you're messaging your players on a country by country basis. And not just they have the technical capability to do that, but they have the strategic policy in place to really address each component as you need to be able to maximize the opportunity there. And the other component is just optimization. Like any other part of the game, like you A/B test, you figure out what works with your players, like what's the right messaging, what incentivizes them enough to get to the store without being detrimental to the game economy. Is it 10% more? Is it 20% more? Is it more than that? And testing some of the messaging to see, maybe even testing the landing page, see is it really beneficial? Should we just go to the checkout page? Maybe it's better if we go to the store page. But at the end of the day, testing is kind of how you figure out where the right landing spot is for your game.
Awesome, thank you. So we're doing pretty good on time, so I'm actually going to skip down a couple of questions because I think this one kind of rolls right into this. So, Maxim, do you expect that markets outside of the U.S. To have kind of a similarly evolving regulations and growth opportunities in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so, or I hope so. That of course, like other countries will follow, and will put a little bit more like pressure on both walled gardens to play with like commissions and also like regulation to allow using out of the store payments and links and many things, but it will be a slow process. I believe so, because based on our experience now, for example, for Epic, it took, as far as I remember, like 5 years, more than 5 years, to achieve this success. And for other countries, it could be, it could also like take the same amount of years. But definitely, of course, other countries will follow. Yeah.
Do you know of any that are already kind of moving in that direction outside of the U.S.? Like, because I know, like you just mentioned, there's 6 years of progress that started there. Is there anybody else that's already kind of doing that? And Chip, I can kind of throw that to you as well.
Yeah, as far as I remember, Epic versus Apple case speeded up conversation between Japanese government and Apple for the same thing. And this is definitely like a good progress. But overall, globally, yeah, there are not so many, less than 10 countries which pushed Apple or Google or both to open ecosystem. And in these countries, for example, like in South Korea, Apple and Google, they were like very creative in terms of how they are applying so. So technically, you're not saving a lot, leading customers out of the store. But in the United States, it's different. In Japan, it's different. And I think that the rest of the world will follow.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I can add, I think we're at this interesting point globally where there's this kind of growing momentum, but it's also in this kind of investigatory period where Spain announced that, I think it was just last month, that they're deepening their antitrust probe into Apple, right? But they've said that will take a year to play out. And then maybe after that we start to see something more impactful there. In Brazil, they've called for deeper regulations against Apple and Google's anti-steering policies so that they can open up the stores a bit more. But again, that's just them, like a regulatory agency calling for a deeper investigation into this. It doesn't quite have the teeth of any of the rulings that we've seen in the United States yet, and it will take time to get there. So I think, to Maxim's point, like the wheels of justice turn slowly, as the expression goes, and so it will take time. But there's clearly momentum heading in that direction. And on the act in Japan, it goes into effect December 18th, so of this year. So there was an act established last summer. But they said it will take over a year for this to actually have an impact, right? It will take time for us to roll this out. We're going to give Apple and Google time to adjust to the impact this ruling will have. But they've said they plan for it to go into effect on December 18th, and that will span across both Apple and Google, and it has very similar language to what we're seeing in the United States. Now, we'll have to wait, see what that looks like in practice, see if it gets delayed further, because Apple and Google are certainly pushing against this. But obviously the Japanese gaming market is very significant too, and so that's one to watch, and I would circle that December 18th date on the calendar.
Awesome, thanks. So hopefully what's already happened is kind of laid out that framework for other countries, and it's not that same 5-6 year process, right? Okay, so I'll pass this one to you, Chip. I think this is a really important one for us to talk, kind of talk through here. So what impact do you expect from the Epic versus Google ruling in the US?
Yeah, I think we're still figuring that out. So Epic versus Apple was on April 30th. Right? So we've had 3.5 months to really understand what that ruling looks like, see companies adapt to it, roll it out in practice, see the growth that they're seeing in direct-to-consumer from being able to steer players into their direct-to-consumer platform. And so that's had an extremely significant impact on direct-to-consumer growth. So that's great, but it's all contained to iOS. Well, just about 2 weeks ago, we saw a very similar ruling on Android. We saw Epic Games versus Google get affirmed in the courts, which means these rules should now go into effect on Android as well. But again, there was a 2-week grace period for Google to adjust to this. And then that was delayed to 3 weeks, which we're in that current murky 2 to 3 week window right now. So it hasn't actually had an effect yet. And there's some chance that Google is able to delay that further, right? So that's why I'm kind of not holding my breath as to when this will actually go into effect. But as far as the ruling itself, I think the most likely outcome, at least immediately, is that we see on Android the same opportunity we're seeing today on iOS, meaning we could steer players into the store, we could steer players into a checkout page on Android just as we can on iOS, which essentially doubles the market opportunity there, right? We can really see the accelerated growth on Android that we have on iOS already. But what's really interesting about the Epic versus Google ruling, I think 2 parts. One, the courts have made it clear they're going to treat these 2 cases separately. So what we see on iOS, we should not expect to be replicated on Android, and vice versa. They're going to treat them as 2 completely different cases in the courts. And I say that because the second part that's interesting is this Epic versus Google ruling has some language in it around alternative app stores. And so things like the Epic Games Store, because Epic Games is leading this case, could become viable on Android in a way that they've never been before. Google Play has always said if you're going to distribute on Google Play, you have to use the Google Play Store, right? Understandably. But now in the United States, that might not need to be the case. And so I think the most likely outcome is we see this kind of on a piecemeal basis with this ruling. Like, it's so broad in terms of what's within the scope of it. So I think most likely first we see steering enabled on Android, just because we're already seeing that on iOS. And then maybe later on we see alternative app stores unlocked and some of the other parts of the ruling come through.
Okay, awesome. Do you have anything from your perspective on that, Maxim? I'll repeat it for you. But.
No need. I started to think what is like more important, like opening direct checkout or like web shops opportunity for developers or alternative stores. And I think that, let's say, at least like from like Playrix's perspective and other like big developers, I think direct checkout is like more important. But yeah, alternative app store, nice to have, but not for everyone.
Yeah. I think that's the difference, right, between distribution and monetization, right? And distribution is that upfront install, and I think there's a ton of value you get from Apple and Google to help facilitate that, and that players trust Apple and trust Google and know they can reach the games they want to reach through those platforms, as opposed to installing a different store and then using that store and getting familiar with that store. I think that's a bit more of a hurdle. So I think even if these alternative stores are unlocked, I think it'll be a little while before we see them really have ramifications in the industry. Whereas we're already seeing that momentum on the checkout side, and we just need more opportunities to market and monetize. And so I think that's where the more immediate opportunity is.
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
Okay, so we'll change it up a little bit here. So what are the main reasons that you're hearing from companies for not pursuing D2C? And what are you guys advising them?
Yeah, this one is tough one. Like first of all, what I'm hearing from like a lot of different companies, not only like PlayRix, but medium-sized and small companies, that companies still afraid to do like a first step because they are afraid that store will apply some kind of, I don't know, not sanctions, but penalize work with this developer. And because of that, not many companies are like speeding up the whole process. And this is probably like number one reason why. Second one, because before there were no regulation, and before also companies were afraid to test, there is lack of experience what to do, what user flow to create, how convenient for customers will be the whole like UI UX journey, and because that it like will take time to get this experience, and this is like a second blocker. And if you are working with like a massive amount of customers, let's say if your MAU is like 120 million per month, of course you don't want to screw the whole process, and you don't want to get like negative feedback from all these customers. Yeah, so these two reasons. What about YouTube?
Yeah, I have one I've heard pop up a little more recently that I think is questionable, but I want to serve it and then kind of explain it. So I've heard the notion that, like, yes, there's this Epic versus Apple ruling in the United States, and it's having this impact today. But we also know that that Apple is appealing that, which is true. Apple is still appealing this ruling. They're still fighting this ruling, and it could go either way at the end of that appeal. Maybe Apple does win that appeal, and maybe these rulings do get reversed. And so at that point, we have to reevaluate how we're steering in Apple on iOS in the United States. It's all fair. And so the response from a publisher may be, okay, I don't want to invest in direct-to-consumer until this is finalized, until there's no appeals pending and everything is played out completely, and I can have full confidence that this is the state of play and it's not going to change. And I get that notion, but I think the fallacy there is that it takes a long time. Like, games are capitalizing today. Games have seen more than double their direct-to-consumer revenue just because of these steering policies. We've seen that firsthand at FastSpring. And so there's this opportunity to make your game more profitable and to cultivate that direct relationship with your players because of these recent rulings. And because of this kind of exaggerated concern about this appeal that is still pending, you're leaving that opportunity on the table. Also, we don't know when that appeal is going to play out. Like, this could take months. As Maxim said, it took 5 years to go from this initial lawsuit from Epic to get to this impactful ruling that we're seeing today. And so maybe it's months, maybe it's next year, maybe it's late next year, whenever this appeal gets a decision one way or the other. I don't know. It's the timeline is the time horizon is a little unpredictable. But again, you're waiting on an unpredictable end date. And the last part I'll say on that is, I'm not a legal expert, but I feel pretty confident that once this appeal gets decided, guess what's going to happen next? Another appeal. Like, that's just how the United States court system works. If Apple wins, okay, well, Epic can appeal that decision, and then that appeal goes further. If Apple doesn't win and Epic prevails in this appeal, well, Apple can then appeal to a higher court. And so at that point, if you have this logic, then you'll be waiting for that appeal to play out, and it just keeps going, right? And so I think what we know is that the rules are as they are today. The opportunity is there today, and so it makes sense to invest today.
Awesome, thank you. So I think that we'll ask a kind of a different question here again. We'll change it up. So what are the most sophisticated publishers doing and thinking in the area? And then, what's the end game there?
Based on my experience, the most sophisticated like publishers and developers who are really doing great job using like web shops and different like out of the store payments. Social casino, number one. I think this is they started to experiment long time ago, and a lot of companies in like social casino, they do have alternative ways how to accept payments from customers. And they are the most sophisticated. Second one, I think that hardcore games, I believe like shooting games, because they are providing for customers to buy like prepaid cards and a lot of other things to accept payments out of the store. They're like second biggest. Casual, like less sophisticated, like nobody in casual, and especially like match titles or like merge. Don't have like experience to play, and like casual, they're still like exploring. Yep.
Yeah, I think the tactics employed vary significantly by genre, and that impacts the ceiling you have by genre. But also that's why this steering has been so impactful, because I think the advantage a mid-core game might have is being able to have these communities that have a really strong word of mouth, right, to talk about your web store. So regardless of any steering policies, your players can, like if I'm in a guild and I'm playing this game aggressively and I find out I can get more from purchasing here than I can on mobile, okay, well, I'm going to tell the rest of my guild, hey, go purchase here, because like that gives our guild a competitive advantage, right? And so it gets this really organic traction within your game, whereas you don't have that on casual, right? Nobody talks about a casual game outside of the game itself. So that's where I think steering has become so important, is that's your opportunity to use the game to funnel players into your store. So you can now, in a casual game, maybe it is a little bit easier now, and you have a much better opportunity now because of the steering policies that you can directly navigate players from the game into an off-platform payment. And I think that will kind of level things out more between genres, because yeah, so far we have seen it index much more toward the mid-core, hardcore titles, but as we see more steering, I think that'll start to level out.
Awesome. So you talked about the future and how things could potentially flip back, right? So kind of in that frame, what's the best way that publishers big and small can maximize for the opportunity, even knowing that it could flip on them?
Yeah, I think the chance it fully flips is pretty remote. I mean, it is a possibility at some point in the future, but I feel like the toothpaste is out of the tube, as it were.
Sure.
So you can't put it back in. And so I do think we'll see the momentum continuing to build in this direction in different countries at different rates, and we'll see companies continue to benefit from that. And so as far as what companies can do, the most basic level is have that technical foundation in place, which means being able to have that store in different places and make sure your game can accommodate a purchase on web, and not just have that purchase, but then have that purchase be immediately available to the player once they get back into the mobile game. So having that the systems talk to one another very efficiently. But the other part that's become clear is the geographic segmentation. I wouldn't have said that a year ago as like something you absolutely need, but in order to be able to capitalize on these policies effectively, you have to be able to know if your player's in the United States on iOS or in Germany on Android or wherever they are, because you'll be messaging things differently to them.
Sure.
But let's say you have those in place and you have a great payment provider, which is something else to consider, because you need that payment platform. You're processing the payments yourself now, right? You're not going through Apple or through Google. You're going off platform. And so you need a platform that can scale with your game, that has the payment methods and currencies that resonate with your game. Maybe your game is big in certain regions in Asia, and so you need to make sure those currencies and payment methods are available from whatever your payment partner is, to better serve your game. You need to make sure that partner can scale with your game. When you have your biggest revenue day of the year, well, maybe it's Black Friday and every game is having their biggest revenue day of the year. And so like any technical platform, there can be constraints there. The last thing you want is to be constrained by your partner in that respect. So Just thinking of all these different things as you choose the right partner for you. And then once you have that technical foundation and that partner in place, it's really about these regulations to me. Like that's the other part to do and really start thinking about today is mapping, okay, what's going on a global scale with these different regulations? What's this Japan Act look like? And when does that go into effect? What's Brazil doing? And okay, is there any movement there? Okay, what's the latest on that United States Apple ruling or the United States Google ruling? And how can I start to treat these players differently? And so finding a way to really wrap your arms around that so that you can make the most of the opportunity is really important too. And of course, there's a lot of optimization within that too, is what companies can do as far as optimizing the messaging you're using, the offers you're serving, the segmentation. But I think really the regulations are clearly the key piece right now that will impact your strategy. And then as those evolve, being able to adapt to that is important.
Awesome. Anything that you want to add on maximizing opportunities?
No, I think that you covered.
Okay, cool. So, and we don't have a ton of time left, so I'm gonna kind of leave us with this one. In hindsight, knowing everything that they know now, right? Like it's hindsight's 2020, right? But so in hindsight though, but knowing what they know, would Epic have the same battle against Apple and Google? Would would they have gone about it the same way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking about like all the time when I was like watching news about like Epic Apple case, Epic Google case, and other Epic cases. And I think that yes, knowing all these that they achieved now, and even like without knowing, they will definitely like repeat the same battle because it was. I think that like a lot of companies, they were like discussing question about like reducing fees from the stores like multiple times with the stores, big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies, and all of us, we were at some point like tired, and it was quite, I don't know how to like explain in English, but it was like kind of like a principle to go and achieve success. And especially knowing that companies in non-gaming achieve success before. And there are a lot of like examples. So when in non-gaming, these barriers were reduced, and for gaming it was still the same. So yeah.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think like I agree. I think like had they known that, they would have, because at the end of the day, they've kind of had the outcome they wanted, right? Like they're forcing the stores to be more open, and I think the really cool part is that it's making the industry better. So like if I just obviously like I'm with FastSpring and I want more people to invest in direct to consumer, right? Like that's my bias. But if I set that aside, like driving more payments off platform and having this open commerce model, this democratization of payments is really healthy for the industry. It makes games more profitable, which is great. It empowers publishers to have a more direct relationship with players and empowers them to pick the partners they want to work with and selecting those instead of being beholden to two specific distribution partners. And so I think there's a lot of wonderful ramifications that come out of that. And that's why like I'm extremely appreciative of what Epic has done, because it hasn't been easy and it's taken a long time, and I think we need to reflect on that as well and say like this is an incredible outcome, but it certainly wouldn't have happened without their initial effort too.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for that. We have a little bit of time left for questions. I'm going to toss it out to you guys. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for these? Sure, I'll bring you the mic.
In going D2C and moving a little bit more away from the platforms like Apple and Google, and now that organics are kind of moving away, they're not working so much for people except for a handful of developers on the app stores. Like, what kind of opportunities are there for new kinds of data and telemetry in organics? Do you guys see any of that emerging? You know, before it was just, okay, you know, what are your impressions on the stores, and or did this social post do anything? Like now that consumers are slowly moving elsewhere, what's an opportunity there that you guys see?
Frankly speaking, I don't have answer on like this question because again, like now I'm seeing like very few tests that like very few companies are like testing and they start to think. I'm pretty sure there should be like an upfront in terms of how valuable will be like first of all like D2C, and second one like data around like D2C. Because what I'm thinking that, for example, like from user acquisition standpoint, not user acquisition, retargeting standpoint, this kind of like out of the store payments and also like web shop technically can unlock for you an opportunity to retarget customers in web where price of like CPM, CPIs should be cheaper, not, yeah. And then you can get extra revenue from like retargeting. But nobody, maybe somebody explored this area, but I haven't heard anything about this. This is just my thought. But retargeting opportunity, yeah, I was thinking about like web shop and yeah. What do you think?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it's the way this will likely evolve is through leveraging more of the data we have, because we do have more data, right? We have more data on the customers in a way that Apple and Google, especially Apple, are really protective of the data and how you can optimize toward players. So I think both organic and paid will benefit from that. But I think we haven't seen that really come to pass yet. And so I think for me, that's kind of a wait and see to see just how much flexibility, how much data we have, and like how much install potential is there coming through these other channels.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
When you take away the restrictions from that were being imposed by the app stores, I guess the question I have is, how much do things actually change in practice? As in, the companies, if it's not the app stores that is like basically handling that for them, they have two options, right? They are either going to make their own payment processing, which is very unfeasible for most companies, or they're gonna go to like one of the big providers, like Stripe, for example. So I guess the question is, in practice, how much does that actually shift things in terms of like monetary gain back for the company?
Yeah, it's very significant just because the margin discrepancy is so significant, right? So instead of paying 30% to Apple and Google, you're paying much closer to maybe 5% to a merchant of record. And so we're also seeing a number of different merchants of record popped up. A number have popped up in the last 2 years, seeing this opportunity, and then we see more companies start to do that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity out there from the merchant side of things, whether FastSpring or otherwise. We're seeing different companies try to drive that. So I think in practice, yeah, like gaming publishers, unless maybe you're some of the very, very top publishers, you don't want to invest in payments. Like you want to invest in making games, you want to invest in making great games, and that's where a company like ours comes in. So yeah, I don't expect we'll see a lot of companies wanting to process their own payments or anything, because then they have to mess with taxes and currency conversion and fraud and risk management and all that stuff. That's all like stuff you want to offload to a third party like us. So I think you will see more partners come in, like a FastSpring, to handle the payments on their behalf. But the other part that we didn't really touch on that I think it could be in practice is seeing Google lower that threshold. Google and Apple lowered the 30%. I think that's kind of the nuclear option to them. Like they're not going to do that as much as they can, because it's such a valuable revenue stream. But then if enough payments do shift off platform, then I think they have to consider lowering that 30% to then incentivize publishers to drive revenue through mobile, right? And so I think there eventually can be some push and pull between like, okay, how much value am I getting by driving those payments off platform? So we're not there yet. It hasn't reached that critical mass yet, but as we see that revenue percentage start to grow, I think that's something that Apple and Google might consider too.
I think that like developer and publisher, they can save on this like regulation and accepting payments D2C or through web shops from around like 10 to maximum 18%. So this is like their uplift. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
Hi. Do you see with this kind of new direct-to-consumer model and now that people are not going to pay 30% anymore to the app stores, do you see a comeback of any kind of type or genre or model of games? You see this kind of a new cycle coming? I mean, it's a guess, but do you guys, with your experience, do you have a good guess about what's coming?
Ooh, I like that question because I haven't thought that much about how the shift in direct-to-consumer could influence like the strategy of what games are made, right? And what games might be made to capitalize on that strategy. That's a really interesting way to look at it. I think in my most optimistic ruling about my most optimistic perspective on these rulings is that it will, because games are made more profitable, it lowers the threshold for what a quote unquote successful game is, right? And so if the game profit is inherently raised, what, 10 to 18% is a figure you gave. Okay, well maybe that means we start seeing more green lights for games because again we're lowering that threshold just a little bit. So maybe that means we're seeing some more creative things, and it's not as much about sequels; it's about different ideas and creative concepts. Like I don't think this is this transformative moment where just the entire industry is going to change, but I do think it's a significant shift that could unlock more opportunities like that.
Yeah, I think that we might see some like impact in highly competitive like genres. For example, like for casual and like especially like match 3 because it's like like very high competitive industry in terms of user acquisition. We might see benefits, and for hardcore, highly competitive genres as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, Chip. And Maxim, thank you for all the information.
Thank you.